Across the skin of our world, etched into its deserts and hidden within its deepest jungles, lie the whispers of forgotten epochs. They are silent monuments of stone and earth, sentinels that have watched millennia of stars wheel across the sky. They stand in defiance of the wind and the rain, and more importantly, in defiance of the simple story of our past. We are taught that the history of human civilization is a neat, linear progression, a slow crawl from primitive hunter-gatherers to the first farmers, who then built villages which grew into towns and finally into the great cities and empires of antiquity. It's a logical, predictable path, a slow, painstaking progress from simple huts to monumental architecture. It's the story written in our textbooks, the foundation of our modern understanding of who we are. But what if that foundation is fractured? What if, scattered across the globe, there exists a pattern of evidence that doesn't fit this timeline? Structures that are too old, engineering that is too precise, and megaliths that are too massive for the accepted capabilities of their supposed builders. These are not mere curiosities or isolated puzzles. They are profound anomalies, geological and archaeological fingerprints of a past that seems impossible. These sites challenge us. They compel us to ask uncomfortable questions. Are we looking at the work of primitive people who somehow stumbled upon a genius far beyond their time? Or are we seeing the faint, last echoes of a lost chapter in the human story, the legacy of a forgotten world, a previous age of mankind whose knowledge and accomplishments have been almost entirely erased from our collective memory? This is a journey into those cracks in our official history. We will travel to the far corners of the earth, not to dismiss science, but to question the conclusions drawn from incomplete evidence. We will stand before these impossible structures and listen to the stories they tell, stories of a past far older, far more mysterious, and far more advanced than we have ever dared to imagine. Our journey begins now by asking the one question upon which everything else rests. What if the story of human civilization is wrong? What if the book of our history is missing its very first and most important chapters? To find the answer, we must go back to the beginning, further back than any textbook would have you believe is possible. Chapter 2, Göbekli Tepe, the Temple Before Time. Our search for those missing first chapters of the human story takes us here, to the sun-scorched plains of southeastern Anatolia. For thousands of years, this was just another hill in a landscape of many, a gently rounded mound known to locals as Göbekli Tepe, or Potbelly Hill. Farmers tilled the soil around its base, occasionally striking their plows against large, oddly shaped limestone blocks, which they would move to the edges of their fields, dismissing them as little more than ancient gravestones. For decades, even archaeologists overlooked the hill, believing it to be nothing more than a medieval Byzantine cemetery, a minor footnote in a land saturated with history. No one suspected the truth. No one could have possibly imagined
that beneath a few feet of soil and the dust of ages, an impossible secret was sleeping. A secret so profound it was destined to rewrite the very first page of human civilization. The story of its discovery begins in 1994 with a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt. Drawn to the site by an earlier report mentioning flint chips and those strange limestone slabs, he began to survey the hilltop. What he saw was not a forgotten cemetery. The stones were not medieval. He recognized the telltale signs of human workmanship from the Stone Age, the Neolithic. But it was the sheer scale of what he was finding just on the surface that stunned him. This was not a small settlement. It was something vast, something monumental. With a small team, he began to excavate. And as the layers of earth were peeled back, a structure unlike anything ever seen before emerged into the modern world. Not a village, not a city, but a temple, or something far stranger. A breathtaking complex of massive, T-shaped monolithic pillars arranged in great circles. The largest of these pillars stand over 18 feet tall and weigh an estimated 20 tons. They were carved from limestone quarries over a mile away, shaped with an artist's precision and erected in a time when the wheel had not yet been invented and metal tools were still thousands of years away. When the organic material found at the site was carbon dated, the archaeological world was thrown into a state of shock. The results were undeniable and unbelievable. The oldest layers of Göbekli Tepe were constructed around 9600 BC. Let that date sink in. This is not 9600 years ago. This is over 11,600 years ago. This makes Göbekli Tepe more than 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It is more than 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is a structure built in what we have always considered the infancy of our species, a time when humanity was supposed to be living in small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers, their lives dictated by the seasons and the migrations of wild game. Göbekli Tepe is a masterpiece of megalithic architecture from the heart of the Stone Age, and its very existence is a paradox. The mainstream archaeological consensus, forged in the wake of this stunning discovery, is itself a revolution in historical thinking. For centuries, the accepted model of civilization was what scholars called the Neolithic Revolution. The story went like this. First, humanity invented agriculture. The stability of farming allowed nomadic hunter-gatherers to settle down into permanent villages. This surplus of food and sedentary lifestyle led to complex societies, social hierarchies, and eventually organized religion and the construction of large temples. First came the farm, then came the temple. Göbekli Tepe utterly demolishes this theory. Archaeologists have scoured the site for any evidence of permanent settlement and found none. There are no houses, no hearths, no domestic buildings of any kind. Furthermore, the thousands of animal bones found at the site are all from wild species, and the plant remains are from wild grasses. There is no evidence of domesticated animals or farmed crops. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were not farmers, they were hunter-gatherers.
This has forced archaeology to completely reverse its most fundamental axiom. It now appears that it was the shared belief system, the desire to come together to build something magnificent and sacred, that came first.
The sheer logistical challenge of constructing Göbekli Tepe likely spurred the invention of agriculture itself. Hundreds of workers, drawn from miles around, would need to be fed and urbanized for months or years at a time. This would have required the managed cultivation of wild grains and the corralling of animal herds. In essence, the temple built the city, not the other way around. The purpose of the site, according to this view, was a grand spiritual center, a kind of regional cathedral for the Stone Age. The T-shaped pillars, devoid of facial features, are interpreted as stylized human figures, perhaps ancestors or supernatural beings, their arms carved in low relief along their sides. The pillars are adorned with a stunning menagerie of animal carvings, executed with incredible artistic skill. Foxes, gazelles, boars, cranes, lions, and serpents writhe across the stone surfaces. These were not the animals they typically ate. Instead, they are seen as powerful spiritual symbols, guardians, or perhaps characters in a complex and now forgotten mythology. This was a place of ritual, of ceremony, a sacred pilgrimage site where disparate clans could gather, solidifying social bonds and sharing a common cosmology. It was, in short, the birthplace of organized religion. And this is where the simple explanation ends and the profound mystery begins. The mainstream view, as revolutionary as it is, struggles to answer the most critical questions. It tells us the what, but it falls silent on the how and the why. To accept that nomadic hunter-gatherers built Göbekli Tepe is to accept a series of near impossibilities that challenge the very limits of what we thought primitive people were capable of. First, there is the paradox of labor and logistics. Organizing a workforce large enough to quarry, transport, and erect dozens of multi-ton monoliths is a monumental undertaking even for a settled agricultural society. For a society of scattered, non-sedentary hunters, it seems unthinkable. Where did they live? How were they fed, clothed, and housed for the immense periods of time required? The theory that the project spurred agriculture is an elegant intellectual solution, but it lacks concrete evidence and glosses over the sheer will and sophisticated social organization required to even begin such a project. It's a classic chicken and egg problem, and Göbekli Tepe sits in the middle of it like a stone sphinx. Then there is the engineering. Look closely at the pillars. They were not crudely hacked from the ground. They were extracted from limestone bedrock using stone wedges and hammers. Imagine the patience, the precision required. A single miscalculation, a crack in the wrong place, and a pillar that had taken months to carve would be ruined. They were then transported over a mile uphill to the summit. How? Without wheels, without beasts of burden, how did they move objects weighing as much as 3 large elephants? The conventional answer involves wooden sledges, ropes, and immense manpower. But this assumes an understanding of physics, friction, and social coordination that is simply not supposed to exist for another 6 millennia. And the artistry. This is not primitive cave art. The carvings are sophisticated, stylized, and charged with symbolic meaning. But the most stunning feature is what lies at the center of the main enclosures. 2 enormous central pillars, taller than all the others, stand parallel to each other. They seem to serve as the focal point, the very heart of the sanctuary. Their orientation suggests a deep understanding of their environment, a purpose beyond simple decoration. The entire site is a testament to abstract thought, complex symbolism, and a shared cosmology of staggering depth. It's the work of a people who possessed a rich inner world, a structured understanding of the universe. This is the intellectual output of a mature culture, yet it appears on the world stage with no prior build-up, no simpler prototypes. It's like finding a jet engine in a world that has only ever known the horse-drawn cart. The conventional narrative, while accepting the site's age, asks us to believe that all of this, the social organization, the engineering know-how, the profound artistry, and the complex cosmology simply sprang into existence, fully formed, out of a primitive hunter-gatherer society. It asks us to accept a cultural and technological Big Bang that defies the gradual, evolutionary pace of human history. But what if it wasn't a beginning at all? What if it was an echo? To truly confront the mystery of Göbekli Tepe, we must be willing to ask more radical questions. We must look at the clues left in the stone, clues that may point to a history far stranger and ancient than we can imagine. One of the most enigmatic pillars at the entire site is known as Pillar 43, located in Enclosure D. It is often called the Vulture Stone, and it is covered in a collection of symbols that seem to tell a terrifying story. On it we see many of the familiar animals, but also a scorpion, a headless man, and a prominent vulture. Some researchers, looking at this arrangement, saw not a random collection of symbols, but something far more specific: a star map.
Independent researchers have compellingly argued that the animals on the vulture stone correspond to specific constellations. The scorpion represents Scorpio. The bird-like figure corresponds to Sagittarius. The bent-winged bird to Libra. If this is correct, then Pillar 43 is a snapshot of the sky at a very specific moment in time. Using computer simulations to wind back the precession of the equinoxes, they were able to find a date that perfectly matched the arrangement of these constellations on the pillar. That date was approximately 10,950 BC. This date is not random. It coincides perfectly with the onset of the Younger Dryas, a devastating period of planetary climate chaos that saw temperatures plummet, ice sheets surge, and countless animal species, including the North American mammoth, go extinct. The cause of the Younger Dryas is still debated, but a leading theory proposes that it was triggered by a collision with fragments of a large comet. Suddenly, Pillar 43 looks less like a mythological scene and more like a detailed memorial, a scientific observation of a cataclysmic event. The headless man could represent the widespread loss of life. The pillar could be a monument to a global disaster that reshaped the world. This would imply that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not just gifted stonemasons, they were astronomers. They possessed a legacy of scientific knowledge that allowed them to observe, record, and memorialize a cosmic event of immense significance.
This single pillar, opens up a breathtaking possibility. What if Göbekli Tepe was not built by simple hunter-gatherers who were just starting their journey towards civilization? What if it was built by the survivors of a much older, far more advanced civilization that was all but wiped out by the Younger Dryas cataclysm? What if the purpose of the site was not to invent a new religion, but to preserve the essential knowledge of a lost world? A place to gather the survivors, to restart the human story, and to build a time capsule of stone containing a dire warning about the fragility of life on Earth and the destructive power of the cosmos. This would explain the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge. It wasn't invented here, it was remembered here. The sophisticated engineering and symbolism were not a sudden flash of genius. They were the last vestiges of a dying flame, a legacy of knowledge passed down by the traumatized survivors of a golden age that had been brought to a sudden, violent end. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most baffling mystery of all. Around 8000 BC, after 1,500 years of use, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. This was not a gradual abandonment, where the site slowly fell into ruin and was covered by the sands of time. The evidence is clear. The enclosures were intentionally and painstakingly backfilled. Ton upon ton of earth, stone, and animal bone were used to entomb the entire complex, preserving it perfectly until its rediscovery in our time. Why? Why would a people spend centuries, generations, building the most spectacular structure on Earth, only to deliberately and meticulously bury it? The act is unprecedented. It is perhaps the single greatest act of archaeology in reverse that has ever been discovered. To bury something on this scale suggests a purpose as profound as its original construction. Were they trying to protect it from a future catastrophe? Were they hiding it, preserving its sacred knowledge until a future time when humanity would be ready to understand its message? Or was the act itself the final ritual, a symbolic closing of a chapter, a burial of the old world so that a new one could begin? The deliberate burial is the final silent clue. It transforms Göbekli Tepe from an ancient temple into a time capsule. It was built to last, and then it was hidden to be found. Göbekli Tepe is more than just the world's oldest temple. It is an indictment of our historical arrogance. It proves that a profound amnesia has afflicted our species. It stands as a testament to the fact that 11,600 years ago, people we call primitive possessed a technical, artistic, and spiritual sophistication that we are only just beginning to appreciate. They were not at the dawn of civilization. They may have been watching its twilight. The impossible skill on display here, a knowledge of stonework that seems to emerge from nowhere, forces us to question everything. It compels us to look for its echoes elsewhere in the ancient world, to search for other fingerprints of these forgotten master builders. If hunter-gatherers on the plains of Anatolia could quarry, shape, and erect these magnificent monoliths, what could a truly settled civilization, high in the rarefied air of the Andes, achieve with stone? The answer, like Göbekli Tepe itself, is a puzzle that history still cannot solve. The echoes of forgotten knowledge so powerfully suggested at Göbekli Tepe are not confined to the old world. To follow the trail of these impossible skills, we must leave the cradle of civilization and journey halfway across the globe, ascending into the heavens themselves. Our destination is the Altiplano of Bolivia, a vast, wind-swept plateau sitting more than 12,000 feet above sea level. This is a stark, unforgiving landscape, where the air is thin and the sun is harsh. It is one of the most difficult places on the planet for human civilization to take root. And yet, it is here, near the southern shores of the sacred Lake Titicaca, that we find the ruins of a truly enigmatic ancient city, Tiwanaku. And within Tiwanaku lies a site so anomalous, so technologically baffling, that it seems to have been dropped into our world from another time. It is called Pumapunku, the gateway of the Puma. At first glance, Pumapunku doesn't look like much. It appears as a chaotic, post-apocalyptic scene, a field of enormous, finely dressed stone blocks, scattered and shattered as if by a cataclysm of unimaginable power. Megalithic slabs of red sandstone and gray andesite lie toppled, broken, and strewn across the landscape. But as you draw closer, the chaos gives way to a profound and deeply unsettling sense of order. This is not a collection of crude ruins. This is the wreckage of a masterpiece. The stones of Pumapunku are unlike anything else in the ancient world. They are not simply carved, they appear to be precision engineered. We see surfaces that are polished to a glass-like smoothness, perfect right angles, and interior corners that are razor-sharp. We see complex, three-dimensional shapes with a geometric precision that seems utterly impossible for a pre-industrial culture. And most famously, we see the H-blocks. These are complex, standardized blocks of hard andesite, all of which are virtually identical in their dimensions, as if they came off an ancient assembly line. They are cut with such accuracy that they could be interlocked, fitting together like a giant monolithic puzzle, without the use of mortar. This is not the work of simple stonemasons. This is the work of masters. The question is, who were they, and what technology did they possess to achieve this level of perfection? The answer, you will find, only deepens the enigma. According to mainstream archaeology, Pumapunku is an integral part of the great Tiwanaku civilization, a powerful and influential culture that dominated the southern Andes long before the rise of the Inca. The official timeline places the construction of Pumapunku somewhere between 500 and 1000 AD. The Tiwanaku people were skilled architects and engineers, and Pumapunku is considered the zenith of their ceremonial architecture.
The site is interpreted as a grand temple complex, a spiritual and ritualistic center. The massive redstone slabs formed the foundations and floors of what would have been several large buildings. The intricately carved andesite blocks, like the H blocks, are believed to have been part of the walls and gateways, fitting together to create a structure of breathtaking beauty and spiritual significance. The entire complex was likely adorned with precious metals and vibrant textiles, serving as a stage for the empire's most important religious ceremonies, a place where the earthly and divine worlds could meet.
The official explanation for how this was achieved is a testament to human ingenuity and patience. Archaeologists propose that the Tiwanaku people used simple manual tools. The primary tools would have been heavy stone hammers, pounded repeatedly to slowly chip away at the rock. For the finer details and smooth surfaces, they would have used a laborious process of abrasion, rubbing the stone with sand and water for countless hours to grind it down to the desired shape and polish. For the harder andesite blocks, it suggested that they may have used small, rudimentary bronze chisels, though these would have been barely effective against such hard stone. In essence, the accepted narrative is that Pumapunku, with all its mind-boggling precision, was the result of immense time, limitless manpower, and a mastery of simple, primitive techniques. It is presented as the ultimate achievement of Stone Age technology, a proud monument to the Tiwanaku Empire. But when we look closer at the stones themselves, when we examine them not as an archaeologist, but as an engineer, this simple explanation begins to crumble into dust. The mainstream theory asks us to believe that the perfection of Pumapunku was achieved by hand. But the stones themselves tell a different story. They bear witness marks and features that seem to completely contradict the idea of primitive tooling. In fact, they scream of a technology that, according to our historical timeline, should not have existed for at least another 1,000 years. First, let's consider the material. The gray blocks, the intricate and precise ones, are made of andesite. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, andesite scores between a 6 and a 7. For comparison, the bronze tools supposedly used by the Tiwanaku have a hardness of around 3.5. This is like trying to carve a steel countertop with a copper penny. It is technically possible, but the idea of achieving the razor-sharp edges and flawless surfaces we see at Pumapunku with such tools is, from a practical engineering standpoint, absurd. The stone hammers would have been made of even harder rock, like hematite, but using them to create the intricate interior cuts and interlocking channels we find everywhere is simply not feasible. Then there is the precision itself. Modern engineers who have studied the site are consistently baffled. The planes on the surfaces of many blocks are true to within fractions of a millimeter. The right angles are perfect 90-degree corners, not the slightly rounded approximations one would expect from manual abrasion. This level of accuracy is difficult to achieve today with power tools and laser-guided measurement. To suggest it was done by eye and by hand, rubbing with sand and water, defies credibility.
The most damning evidence, however, is found in the details. Many of the andesite blocks feature long, perfectly straight grooves, some only millimeters wide. Others contain small, uniform drill holes. When engineers examined these features, they found that the drill holes were perfectly circular and evenly spaced. The grooves often have profiles that suggest they were cut by a rotating circular blade. In some of the blocks, there are complex interior cuts that meet at perfect angles deep within the stone, places where a simple chisel could not possibly reach. These are not the marks of stone hammers and bronze chisels. These are the telltale signatures of machining. They look for all the world like they were made with high-speed rotary tools, drill presses, and saws.
a level of technology that is indistinguishable from our own. The H-blocks represent the greatest challenge to the official story. They are not only precisely cut, but they are standardized. The fact that there are multiple blocks with identical dimensions suggests a system of mass production, requiring advanced mathematics, standardized units of measurement, and a method for perfectly replicating complex shapes. This is not the hallmark of a Stone Age culture. It is the hallmark of an industrial one. To stand amidst the ruins of Pumapunku is to be confronted with a profound technological disconnect. We see artifacts that clearly display the evidence of modern machining techniques. Yet we are told they were made by a pre-industrial society with simple hand tools. The two realities cannot coexist. One of them has to be wrong. And if the stones are telling the truth, then our history books are not. If primitive tools cannot explain Pumapunku, then we are forced to venture into more speculative, but potentially more plausible territory. We must consider the possibility that the builders possessed a form of technology that is now lost to us, or that the true story of the site is far older and stranger than we've been led to believe. One of the most compelling alternative theories revolves around the idea of lost ancient technology. Engineers like Christopher Dunn, author of Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, have studied the marks on the stones at Pumapunku and concluded that they could only have been made with power tools. This doesn't necessarily mean electric tools with extension cords. The technology could have taken a different form. Some have proposed the use of sonic technology, tools that used high-frequency vibrations to cut and shape stone with incredible ease and precision. This would explain the smooth surfaces and sharp interior corners that are so difficult to achieve through conventional means.
Another fascinating theory suggests that the stones were not carved at all, but cast. This is the ancient concrete or geopolymer theory. Proponents of this idea suggest that the builders of Pumapunku had developed a highly advanced form of concrete. They would have pulverized the andesite rock into a fine powder, mixed it with a binding agent, and then poured this slurry into incredibly precise molds. Once hardened, the result would be a stone block that is chemically almost identical to natural andesite, but which could be formed into any shape imaginable. This theory elegantly explains the impossible precision, the complex shapes, and the standardization of the H-blocks. They weren't hand-carved one by one. They were cast from a single, perfect master mold. While direct evidence for this is still debated, it remains a powerful explanation for features that otherwise defy logic. Perhaps the most profound theory, however, is that Pumapunku is vastly older than the Tiwanaku civilization. This theory suggests that the Tiwanaku people arriving on the Altiplano around 1500 BC found the ruins of Pumapunku already there. They would have recognized the site as the work of gods or legendary ancestors and built their own magnificent city of Tiwanaku alongside it, incorporating the strange, perfect stones into their own legends and rituals. This would mean that the true builders of Pumapunku were a much older, more advanced predecessor civilization that vanished long before the Tiwanaku rose to prominence. This lost civilization would have been the one that possessed the incredible technology, and Pumapunku is their last, silent testament. This idea aligns with local Andean legends that speak of a time before the sun, when the land was inhabited by a race of giants who could move massive stones with sound alone. What destroyed Pumapunku? The sheer devastation suggests a force of incredible power. While earthquakes are common in the Andes, the pattern of destruction seems more chaotic. Some researchers have proposed a massive flood, perhaps a tidal wave from Lake Titicaca, or even a cosmic event like an airburst from a comet, which would have created a shock wave powerful enough to toss the multi-ton blocks like pebbles. Whatever the cause, it was an event that brought the age of precision stonework on the Altiplano to a sudden and violent end. Pumapunku leaves us with a stark choice. Either we accept that a pre-industrial, Stone Age culture somehow, against all logic and evidence, developed a level of precision in stonework that we would struggle to replicate today. Or we accept that our understanding of the past is fundamentally flawed. We must consider that a culture with advanced, almost industrial-level technology existed in the high Andes thousands of years ago, only to be wiped from the face of the earth by a cataclysm, leaving behind only a field of broken, impossible stones. The site is a technological signature, an artifact so far out of its supposed time that it breaks the entire timeline of human development. It demonstrates a mastery of precision and complex three-dimensional geometry that simply should not exist in 1000 AD. Like Göbekli Tepe, it points to a forgotten chapter, a lost episode of immense technological sophistication. The precision of Pumapunku represents one peak of ancient megalithic building. It is the apex of intricate, complex, and delicate work. But what of the other peak? What of sheer brute force? If the builders of Pumapunku were masters of the small and the precise, who were the masters of the colossal and the impossibly heavy? To find them, we must journey from the thin air of the Andes to the fertile valleys of the Middle East, to a place where gods and giants were said to have built a platform using stones so massive they defy the laws of physics itself. If the impossible ruins of Pumapunku represent the zenith of ancient precision, a mastery of the intricate and the complex, our next stop on this journey represents its polar opposite. It is the zenith of raw, unapologetic power, a demonstration of brute force on a scale so grand, so utterly incomprehensible that it makes all other megalithic sites on Earth pale in comparison. To witness it, we travel to the Bekaa Valley of modern-day Lebanon, to a place the Romans called Heliopolis, the city of the sun. Today it is known as Baalbek. From a distance, Baalbek appears to be one of the most magnificent and best-preserved Roman ruins in the world. The temples of Jupiter, Bacchus, and Venus stand as colossal testaments to the power and architectural genius of the Roman Empire. For centuries, historians and tourists have flocked here, marveling at the towering columns and ornate carvings, believing they were witnessing the pinnacle of Roman engineering. But the Romans were latecomers to this sacred ground. Their glorious temples, as magnificent as they are built upon a foundation, a massive stone platform or podium
that is far older, far larger, and infinitely more mysterious than the Roman structures themselves. The true wonder of Baalbek is not what the Romans built, but what they built upon. It is a mystery of such staggering scale that it challenges not only our understanding of Roman capabilities, but the very laws of physics and engineering as we know them. The platform beneath the Temple of Jupiter contains the largest worked stones on the face of the planet. And how they were quarried, transported, and lifted into place is arguably the single greatest engineering enigma of the ancient world. The conventional historical and archaeological narrative attributes the entire construction at Baalbek to the Romans. The story begins after the conquest of the region by Alexander the Great, when the site, originally a center for the worship of the Phoenician sky god Baal, was renamed Heliopolis. When the Romans took control, they embarked on one of the most ambitious and extravagant building projects in the history of their empire, beginning in the 1st century BC. The goal was to create a monumental, sacred complex dedicated to their own sky god, Jupiter. According to this view, Roman engineers, the undisputed masters of the ancient world, were responsible for every stage of construction. They designed the temples, organized the legions of laborers, and most importantly, engineered the quarrying and placement of the gargantuan stones for the foundation. The platform was necessary, it is argued, to create a large, level terrace on the sloping hillside upon which to build the massive temple. The mainstream explanation for how they moved the stones is an extrapolation of known Roman techniques. It involves a combination of immense manpower, sophisticated wooden cranes and lifting towers, multiple capstans and pulleys, and the use of rollers and paved roads to move the blocks from the quarry located about a mile away. It's proposed that thousands of workers, toiling for decades, would have been needed. The largest Roman cranes, documented in texts by engineers like Vitruvius, were capable of lifting several tons. For the larger blocks at Baalbek, it is hypothesized that the Romans constructed enormous, specialized lifting towers, combining the power of multiple cranes and capstans in a way that is not documented anywhere else in the Roman world. The movement from the quarry is thought to have been achieved by dragging the monoliths over a prepared trackway of logs or stone rollers, a slow and perilous journey requiring unbelievable levels of coordination.
In short, the official story portrays Baalbek as the ultimate expression of Roman ambition and engineering prowess. It is seen as a unique project where they pushed their known technology to its absolute limit, and perhaps beyond, to create a monument worthy of the king of their gods. It is a testament to what is possible with unlimited resources, decades of time, and the iron will of an empire. This is the story you will read in the guidebooks. But when you stand before the western wall of the platform and truly comprehend the scale of what you are seeing, this tidy explanation begins to seem less like a historical fact and more like a fairy tale. The problem with the Roman theory is one of simple, undeniable physics. The technology attributed to the Romans, as advanced as it was, has known limitations.
The stones of the Baalbek platform do not just push those limits, they shatter them into a million pieces. Let us focus on the most famous part of the foundation, the western retaining wall. About 20 feet up from the ground, embedded within this wall, are 3 colossal limestone monoliths, known collectively as the Trilithon. Each of these 3 stones is approximately 64 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet thick. Their estimated weight is staggering. While calculations vary, most engineers place them in the range of 800 to 1,000 tons each. Let's try to put that weight into perspective. 1,000 tons is 2 million pounds. It is the equivalent of approximately 1,500 large bulls, or 3 Boeing 747 airplanes. It is a weight that would strain even our largest modern mobile cranes. And we are asked to believe that the Romans, whose largest documented crane capacity was around 50 tons under ideal conditions, somehow lifted not 1, but 3 of these blocks and placed them with seamless precision high up in a retaining wall.
The gap between known Roman capability and what we see in the Trilithon is not a small one. It is a chasm. There is simply no historical, textual, or archaeological evidence that the Romans possessed any technology capable of lifting a 1,000-ton object. No diagrams, no descriptions, no ruins of such a supercrane have ever been found. To attribute the Trilithon to them requires a blind leap of faith, an assumption that they secretly invented a technology far beyond anything else they ever built, used it only here, and then completely forgot about it. It's an argument from silence, and it is profoundly unconvincing. But the Trilithon is not even the end of the story. The true smoking gun of Baalbek lies a mile away in the ancient limestone quarry. There, you will find monoliths that make the Trilithon seem modest. The most famous is known as the Hajar al-Hibla, or the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It is a single, perfectly dressed rectangular block, still attached at its base to the bedrock. It is over 68 feet long and weighs an estimated 1,200 tons. For decades, this was considered the largest worked stone in the world. Then, in 2014, archaeologists digging next to it found another one. This new monolith is even bigger, measuring approximately 65 feet long, 19 feet wide, and 18 feet high. Its estimated weight is an almost unbelievable 1,650 tons.
These quarry stones are the definitive proof. They demonstrate that the Trilithon was not a one-off fluke. The builders of the Baalbek platform were routinely quarrying and dressing blocks in the 1,000 to 1,600 ton range. This was their standard building material. The quarry stones were abandoned, most likely because a flaw was found in the rock, or perhaps because, even for these master builders, they proved just a little too large to handle. The logistical problem of the transport is, if anything, even more daunting than the lift. How do you move a 1,650-ton block over a mile of uneven terrain? including a slight uphill grade to the temple site. The sheer ground pressure would crush any wooden rollers. The friction would be immense. The number of men required to pull such an object and the coordination needed to ensure they all pulled in unison is mind-boggling. Modern heavy haul engineers, when presented with this problem, are baffled. With today's technology, with hydraulic jacks, pneumatic dollies, and megatrucks, it would be an exceptionally difficult and expensive job. To suggest it was done with ropes and logs is to venture into the realm of pure fantasy. The Roman theory simply does not hold up to scrutiny. The evidence in the stone points to a level of engineering capability that far surpasses not only the Romans, but any known ancient culture. If the Romans did not build the platform, then who did? This question opens the door to a past far more mysterious than the one we read about in history books. The most logical and straightforward alternative is that the Great Stone Platform is pre-Roman. It is the work of a much older, unknown civilization, and the Romans simply built their temples on top of a sacred, ancient foundation that they found already in place. This theory neatly explains why the scale of the foundation is so incongruous with the Roman temple above it. The original purpose of the platform may have been entirely different. The Romans, awed by this work of the gods, co-opted the site for their own religious purposes, building upon a legacy they could not hope to replicate. Who were these original, forgotten builders? Local legends and ancient texts may offer a clue. The name Baalbek itself is linked to the Canaanite god Baal. The region is steeped in ancient folklore that speaks of a time when the land was inhabited by a race of giants. The Old Testament, for example, mentions the Nephilim and speaks of giants in the lands near what is now Lebanon. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes the great cedar forest of Lebanon as the dwelling of the gods. Could these persistent legends of giants be a distorted folk memory? Not necessarily of physically larger beings, but of a people who possessed a giant technology. A people with the power to manipulate these colossal stones as if they were simple bricks. This idea resonates with the sheer, superhuman scale of the work. It is literally the work of giants.
This, of course, leads to the question of what this lost technology might have been. As with Puma Pumpu, we are forced to consider possibilities that sound like science fiction, because no conventional explanation fits the facts. Were the stones moved using some form of acoustic levitation, using sound frequencies to reduce the weight of the blocks? Did they possess a technology that could alter the properties of gravity itself? Or was it a more recognizable but still lost form of machinery? Enormous, powerful engines and lifting devices, the remains of which have long since rusted into dust. We have no definitive answers. All we have is the evidence before us. A platform built with a power and skill that is radically out of place in our accepted historical timeline. Baalbek is not a Roman temple. It is a megalithic enigma wearing a Roman mask.
It is the legacy of a civilization whose power we cannot measure and whose name we have forgotten. Baalbek confronts us with an almost spiritual sense of awe. It represents a profound disconnect between the artifact and the explanation. It is a feat of engineering without a known engineer, a monument built with a technology that has no known origin. The sheer will, the ambition, the power required to build it is as mysterious as the methods used. It stands as a silent rebuke to our modern arrogance, a reminder that there are chapters of the human story that are still completely dark to us.
From the impossible power of Baalbek, a mystery of how, we journey now into a mystery of impossible purpose, a riddle of why. Our quest for the fingerprints of a forgotten past takes us deep into the highlands of Laos, to a place that feels less like an archaeological site and more like a scene from a surreal dream. This is the Xiangquan Plateau, a landscape of rolling hills and verdant grasslands that holds one of the most baffling and least understood megalithic enigmas on Earth. It is known to the world as the Plain of Jars. Scattered across more than 90 distinct sites, dotting the ridges and hillsides, are thousands of colossal stone vessels. Carved from solid rock, they range in size from just 3 feet to nearly 10 feet in height, with the heaviest weighing over 20 tons. Some stand in neat, ordered clusters. Others lie scattered and toppled, as if thrown by a careless hand. Many are simple cylindrical forms, while others are more shapely with carved rims. They are silent, gray, and utterly out of place, a forest of stone mushrooms sprouting from the earth.
For centuries they have sat here, enduring the monsoons and the encroachment of the jungle, holding their secrets within. There are no inscriptions on their surfaces, no texts left behind to explain their meaning. The civilization that created them vanished so completely that they did not even leave behind a name. All that remains is this vast, silent testament to their existence, an archaeological puzzle that has perplexed everyone from local villagers to modern scientists. Who carved these thousands of giant jars, and for what earthly or unearthly purpose? Before we can delve into the ancient mystery, we must acknowledge a modern tragedy. For the Plain of Jars sits within the most heavily bombed region per capita on the entire planet. During the Vietnam War, Laos became the theater for a secret war, during which hundreds of thousands of bombing missions dropped millions of cluster bombs across this very landscape. A staggering number of these munitions did not detonate, leaving the Plain of Jars and the surrounding countryside contaminated with deadly unexploded ordnance, or UXO. This brutal legacy has cast a long shadow over the site. For decades, it made comprehensive research impossible, and it has cost countless local people their lives. The ongoing, heroic work of organizations like the Mines Advisory Group, or MAG, has been slowly clearing the land, making it safe for both residents and archaeologists, one painstaking meter at a time. The strange silence surrounding the jars is, in part, a silence imposed by the violence of the 20th century. Only now are we beginning to piece together the clues, separated by both the fog of time and the legacy of war.
The first systematic archaeological investigation of the Plain of Jars was undertaken in the 1930s by the French archaeologist Madeleine Colony. After years of meticulous excavation, she put forth the theory that has remained the bedrock of the mainstream view ever since, that the jars are part of a vast prehistoric burial ground. According to this mortuary theory, the jars were urns or vessels related to a complex, multi-stage funeral rite. The sites are not random. They are deliberately placed along ancient trade routes, often on prominent ridges with a commanding view of the surrounding landscape. The current archaeological consensus places the creation of the jars in the Iron Age, roughly between 500 BC and 500 AD. The people who made them were part of a sophisticated society that flourished in this region, engaging in overland trade with other cultures in Southeast Asia and beyond. Excavations have unearthed human remains around the jars, lending significant weight to the burial theory. Discoveries have included collections of bones, sometimes from multiple individuals, buried in pits alongside the megaliths. Some finds suggest a practice of secondary burial. In this scenario, a deceased person would be placed inside a jar, perhaps with a lid, and left for a period of time for the flesh to decompose. This process is sometimes referred to as defleshing. After this initial stage, the bones would be removed, cleaned, and then buried in a communal plot nearby. The jars, therefore, served as temporary tombs or processing vessels in a long and elaborate journey to the afterlife.
Further evidence comes from objects found buried with the remains. These grave goods include ceremonial pottery, iron and bronze tools, glass beads, and other personal adornments. These artifacts suggest a wealthy and culturally rich society with established beliefs about death and the spirit world. Stone discs, believed to be lids or grave markers, have also been found. Some of them intricately carved with concentric circles or stylized human and animal figures, known as anthropomorphs and zoomorphs. One notable disc from Site 1 depicts a dynamic human figure, perhaps a chieftain or a deity, further cementing the ritualistic nature of the locations. The plain jars in this view is a sprawling, silent necropolis, the final resting place for the elites of a lost Iron Age kingdom. The mortuary theory is plausible, and it is supported by tangible evidence, yet it feels strangely incomplete. It struggles to account for the sheer scale and peculiarity of the endeavor, leaving a host of nagging questions unanswered. When we step back and look at the bigger picture, the explanation of a simple graveyard begins to seem insufficient for the magnitude of the mystery. First, there is the issue of scale versus evidence. There are thousands of jars scattered across the plateau. If each one was used repeatedly for burial rituals over a 1,000-year period, we would expect to find the remains of a vast population. Yet the human remains discovered so far account for only a few hundred individuals. While the contamination from UXO has certainly limited excavations, the disparity is significant.
Could it be that the burials were a secondary use for the jars? Or that only a small fraction of the jars were ever used for this purpose? If so, what was the primary function of the other thousands of vessels?
Then there is the staggering logistical challenge. The jars are carved from sandstone, granite, breccia, and conglomerate, all hard rock. While an Iron Age culture would have possessed iron tools, the labor involved is immense. Each jar had to be hewn from a solid boulder or a cliff face, a process that would have taken months, if not years, per jar. Quarries have been identified several miles from some of the jar sites. This means these multi-ton monoliths were not only carved, but also transported across difficult, hilly terrain. What kind of society could support such an enormous, non-utilitarian public works project, likely spanning centuries and countless generations? The level of social organization, resource management, and unwavering cultural commitment required is breathtaking. And this leads to the most profound problem. This civilization is a ghost. Apart from the jars and the associated burial goods, they have left almost no trace. We have not found their major settlements, their homes, their temples, or any written language. It's as if an entire kingdom dedicated a huge portion of its resources to creating a stone landscape for their dead, and then simply vanished from the historical record. The jars are a conclusion without a preceding story. What impossible purpose do these jars serve?
And finally, the burial theory feels mundane. It feels like a modern attempt to impose a familiar, understandable function onto something utterly alien. Does a complex, multi-stage burial process truly explain the creation of thousands of giant stone urns? Or are we missing a piece of the puzzle so large that we cannot even comprehend the picture it belongs to? When the scientific explanation feels incomplete, we often find clues hidden within the realm of myth and legend. The local folklore of the Xiangkwang region tells a very different story about the jars. The legends speak of an ancient king named Kun Chung. He was a great hero, a giant, who, after fighting and winning a long and difficult battle against his enemy, commanded the creation of the jars. Their purpose? To brew and store vast quantities of potent lao lao, or rice wine, to celebrate the momentous victory.
This story is, of course, considered folklore. But could it be, like many ancient myths, a distorted memory of a real event? The giants could be a metaphor for a people who possessed a giant's strength or technology. The celebratory rice wine could be a symbolic reference to something else entirely. Perhaps a ritual liquid, a spiritual elixir, or even a lost alchemical process. While it seems fanciful, the legend of Hun Chung at least provides a narrative that matches the grand celebratory scale of the sites, something the somber burial theory lacks. Other, more speculative theories have been proposed over the years. Some have suggested the jars were used for collecting monsoon rainwater, which was then consecrated for ritual use. Others have wondered if they were for a more practical, though still mysterious, purpose, like storing or processing a specific type of food for a large, non-settled population. The problem with these theories is a lack of evidence. The jars are unsealed and porous, making them inefficient for long-term storage of either food or water.
Unlike the precise engineering of Pumapunku or the brute force of Baalbek, the mystery here is not about a lost technology, but about a lost meaning. The people of the Plain of Jars challenge us not with their power, but with the depth of their silence. What belief, what story, what conviction could drive a culture to dedicate centuries to carving a landscape of stone vessels? The answer seems to lie forever just beyond our reach, hidden in the mists of the Laotian highlands. The jars sit on the landscape, their forms undeniably the work of human hands, but their purpose remains a complete enigma. But what happens when the enigma is not just the purpose of the very origin of the structure itself? We now journey from the highlands of Laos to the deep waters off the coast of Japan, to a place where the line between the work of nature and the hand of a forgotten civilization becomes almost impossible to see.
Our journey has taken us across the face of the earth, from the impossible timeline of Göbekli Tepe to the impossible power of Baalbek and the impossible purpose of the Plain of Jars. We have explored mysteries etched into the land. But the land is not the only place that holds the secrets of our past. It is said that the ocean is the planet's true keeper of memory, its dark, silent depths a perfect tomb for the worlds that came before. To follow the trail of our lost history to its final, most profound enigma, we must leave the shore behind and descend into the abyss. Our destination is Yonaguni-jima, the westernmost inhabited island of Japan. It is a remote, windswept rock at the very edge of the Ryukyu archipelago, closer to Taiwan than to mainland Japan. For most of its history, it was known only for its powerful rice wine and its unique breed of native horses. But in 1986, a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake, scouting for new hammerhead shark watching spots, stumbled upon something that would forever change the island's destiny. There, between 60 and 100 feet beneath the waves, he found a colossal, monolithic structure stretching for hundreds of feet along the seabed. It was not a random pile of rocks or a natural reef. It looked, for all the world, like a sunken pyramid, a man-made citadel swallowed by the sea. It was a stunning, unbelievable sight. Vast, flat terraces, towering near-perfect right angles, and enormous, distinct steps rising from the ocean floor as if leading to the entrance of a forgotten temple. The discovery would come to be known as the Yonaguni Monument, and it would ignite one of the most ferocious debates in modern archaeology and geology, a debate that cuts to the very heart of how we define nature, intelligence, and the true age of civilization.
The scientific and academic mainstream, for the most part, has concluded that the Yonaguni Monument is an entirely natural geological formation. The voice of orthodox geology argues that while the structure is impressive and certainly looks artificial, its features can be readily explained by the specific geology of the region and the powerful forces of nature that have acted upon it for millennia.
Our journey has taken us across the face of the earth, from the impossible timeline of Göbekli Tepe to the impossible power of Baalbek and the impossible purpose of the Plain of Jars. We have explored mysteries etched into the land, but the land is not the only place that holds the secrets of our past. It is said that the ocean is the planet's true keeper of memory, its dark, silent depths a perfect tomb for the worlds that came before. To follow the trail of our lost history to its final, most profound enigma, we must leave the shore behind and descend into the abyss. Our destination is Yonaguni-jima, the westernmost inhabited island of Japan. It is a remote, wind-swept rock at the very edge of the Ryukyu archipelago, closer to Taiwan than to mainland Japan. For most of its history, it was known only for its powerful rice wine and its unique breed of native horses. But in 1986, a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake, scouting for new hammerhead shark-watching spots, stumbled upon something that would forever change the island's destiny. There, between 60 and 100 feet beneath the waves, he found a colossal, monolithic structure stretching for hundreds of feet along the seabed. It was not a random pile of rocks or a natural reef. It looked, for all the world, like a sunken pyramid, a man-made citadel swallowed by the sea. It was a stunning, unbelievable sight. Vast, flat terraces, towering, near-perfect right angles, and enormous, distinct steps rising from the ocean floor as if leading to the entrance of a forgotten temple. The discovery would come to be known as the Yonaguni Monument, and it would ignite one of the most ferocious debates in modern archaeology and geology, a debate that cuts to the very heart of how we define nature, intelligence, and the true age of civilization. The scientific and academic mainstream, for the most part, has concluded that the Yonaguni Monument is an entirely natural geological formation. The voice of orthodox geology argues that while the structure is impressive and certainly looks artificial, its features can be readily explained by the specific geology of the region and the powerful forces of nature that have acted upon it for millennia.
The leading proponent of this view is Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, famous for his work redating the Great Sphinx of Egypt. After diving the site multiple times, Schoch concluded that the monument is composed of sandstone and mudstone from the Yaeyama group, which dates to the Miocene epoch some 20 million years ago. This type of sedimentary rock is characterized by its very distinct, parallel bedding plains, layers of sediment that were laid down over millions of years. According to Schoch and other geologists, sandstone has a natural tendency to break and fracture along these plains, creating straight lines and flat surfaces. The region around Yonaguni is also highly tectonically active,
sitting within the Pacific Ring of Fire. Earthquakes are common, and these seismic shocks can cause the rock to shear off in remarkably clean geometric ways. Combine this with the powerful, persistent ocean currents in the area, which act like a relentless form of erosion, and you have a recipe for creating a structure that can mimic artificial construction.
The so-called steps and terraces in this view are simply the edges of these natural bedding planes. The walls are natural vertical fractures. Even the seemingly perfect right angles can be explained as the intersection of these vertical and horizontal fractures. Nature, the argument goes, is full of geometric patterns. We see it in crystals, honeycombs, and basalt columns. The Yonaguni Monument, while perhaps the most spectacular example, is ultimately just a geofact, a natural object that looks like an artifact. It is a geological marvel, a testament to the awesome power of plate tectonics and erosion, but it is not the work of human hands. To see a sunken city here is simply a case of pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns and meaning where none exist. The natural formation theory is neat, scientific, and it is the safest conclusion. But for those who have dived the site and studied its features in detail, it feels profoundly inadequate. To proponents of the artificial origin theory, explaining away every single anomalous feature at Yonaguni as a coincidence of natural forces requires a greater leap of faith than accepting the existence of an unknown ancient culture. While a single straight line or right angle might occur naturally, the Yonaguni Monument presents a staggering concentration of these anomalies, arranged in a way that suggests structure, symmetry, and intent. It is this symphony of strangeness, this collection of improbable features in one compact location, that forms the core of the counter-argument. The leading academic voice for the artificial theory is Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryokus in Japan. He has spent over a decade mapping the monument in 3 dimensions, and he has identified a host of specific features that he argues are unequivocally man-made. First, there is the main feature, often called the main terrace or the stage. It is a massive, flat platform, roughly 500 feet long and 150 feet wide, with a towering, stepped face that rises nearly 90 feet from the seabed. The sides of this terrace are not just rough, fractured cliffs. They are composed of a series of distinct 1 to 2 meter high steps that are remarkably consistent in height, forming a grand staircase. Could nature carve such a perfect, repeating ziggurat form? Then there are the surrounding features that seem to form a coherent complex. A wide path, dubbed the Loop Road, encircles a large portion of the main structure. It is flanked by what appear to be deep, straight drainage channels, cut into the rock with precision. Nearby is a feature known as the Stadium, a large, sunken area surrounded by stone seating, reminiscent of a Greco-Roman amphitheater.
Perhaps most compelling are the smaller,
distinct carvings. Proponents point to a feature called the totem, a pillar of rock with what appears to be a carved face. And most famously, there are two enormous, rounded megaliths sitting near the main terrace, which bear an uncanny resemblance to giant turtles, a highly symbolic animal in Asian mythology. Are these all just tricks of light and shadow, random shapes formed by erosion, or are they the weathered remains of deliberate sculpture? Kimura's central point is one of statistical improbability. The odds of natural forces randomly creating all of these features, the terraces, the right angles, the loop road, the channels, the stadium, and the turtle stones in one single interconnected site are, in his view, astronomically low. He argues that the site is, at the very least, a terrace-formed structure, a natural feature that was heavily modified, carved and enhanced by human hands to serve as a ceremonial center. He sees not just a random rock formation, but the clear evidence of urban planning, a castle, temples, a stadium, and a road network, all linked together. If we accept, even for a moment, that Professor Kimura is correct, and that the Yonabuni monument is an artificial or man-in-hand structure, the implications are nothing short of world-changing. This is because of one simple, undeniable fact: its location. The monument is currently under 100 feet of water. For humans to have built it, it must have been on dry land.
Geologists are in universal agreement that the last time sea levels were 100 feet lower in this region was at the end of the last ice age. As the great continental ice sheets melted, sea levels rose dramatically all over the world. For the top of the Yonaguni monument to have been above water, we would have to go back in time at least 10,000 years to approximately 8,000 BC. Some estimates, based on older sea level maps, push this date back even further to 10,000 BC or beyond. This timeline places the monument in direct conflict with the established history of the region. 12,000 years ago, Japan was in its prehistoric Yomon period. The Yomon people are traditionally understood to have been a hunter-gatherer society. While they were sophisticated potters and created unique ritual objects, there is absolutely no evidence in the mainstream historical record that they were capable of organizing the labor or possessing the technology to build massive, multi-ton stone structures. The construction of a city or temple complex on the scale of Yonaguni is simply not something the Yomon people were supposed to be able to do. But here, the monument sits. If it is man-made, it stands as the oldest known large-scale structure on Earth, predating even Göbekli Tepe. It would be irrefutable proof of a highly advanced, megalithic building civilization existing during the depths of the last ice age.
This idea resonates powerfully with one of humanity's most persistent and universal myths, the story of a great flood that wiped out a Golden Age civilization. Nearly every culture on Earth, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the stories of Noah, Manu, and Deucalion, has a foundational myth of a global deluge that submerged the world of their ancestors.
For centuries, these stories have been dismissed as mere allegory. But what if they are a distorted, collective memory of a very real geological event, the catastrophic rise in sea levels at the end of the Ice Age? If so, the Yonaguni Monument could be the first piece of physical archaeological evidence of one of these antediluvian or pre-flood civilizations. It could be the ruins of a Pacific Atlantis, a coastal kingdom swallowed by the rising waters, its existence fading into the realm of myth, its last citadel sleeping beneath the waves until its accidental rediscovery in our time.
In the end, the Yonaguni Monument remains a battlefield of interpretation, a Rorschach test in stone. Is it a grand testament to the power of nature to mimic design? Or is it a silent, eroded testament to a lost chapter of human history that forces us to tear up our timelines and start again? The answer you choose depends on whether you find it more likely that nature randomly carved a perfect city, or that an unknown civilization carved a mountain and was then erased by the sea. The structure rests in its silent, watery abyss, presenting us with the final and most fundamental question of our journey. It is a question that encompasses the impossible timeline of Göbekli Tepe, the impossible precision of Pumapunku, the impossible power of Baalbek, and the impossible purpose of the Plain of Jars. Each site is a powerful challenge on its own, but taken together, they paint a portrait of a past that is profoundly different from the one we have been taught. We are left looking at a world of anomalies, a map of forgotten knowledge stretching across continents and millennia. The question is no longer about any single site, but about the story they tell together. A story that asks us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the human past, and to finally confront the ghosts of the worlds that came before. Taken individually, each site is a profound challenge to the conventional timeline. But taken together, they form a map. They are the waypoints, the surviving outposts of a forgotten world. They are the faint, last echoes of a human story so ancient, its beginnings are lost to us. This map points to a single, breathtaking conclusion: that we are a species with amnesia. The pattern suggests a global, interconnected civilization that flourished in a remote antiquity we can barely conceive of. A civilization that possessed a sophisticated understanding of engineering, astronomy, and the earth itself. Whether they were one people or a network of highly advanced contemporary cultures, they left their fingerprints on every continent, and then they vanished. The timeline of these anomalies often clusters around a single cataclysmic period in Earth's history, the end of the last ice age, an era of violent climate change, soaring sea levels, and mass extinctions. Is it possible that the global flood myths, so persistent in the memory of our ancestors, are not myths at all, but the fragmented, traumatized accounts of a genuine planetary catastrophe that wiped this predecessor civilization from the face of the earth?
perhaps sites like Göbekli Tepe were not a beginning, but a desperate re-beginning. An attempt by the survivors, the inheritors of a shattered world, to preserve their ancestral knowledge in stone for a future generation that they hoped would one day be wise enough to understand it. Perhaps the precision of Pumapunku and the power of Baalbek are not evidence of alien intervention, but a testament to the lost sciences of our own forgotten ancestors.
What else have we forgotten? What other secrets lie buried beneath the sands, the jungles, and the oceans of our world? If a civilization of such sophistication could be so completely erased from memory, how fragile is our own? The stones are silent. They offer no easy answers. They offer only the question. A question that will echo for as long as we dare to ask it. Who are we? And who were we before we forgot?